What's up, you guys? Matthew here. In this video, we have a Harvard professor that claims that the comet 3I-ATLAS could have an alien engine. It's kind of like an ancient aliens. Is it possible that this comet could have an alien engine? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, or in this case, Harvard professor says yes. Let's hear him out here.
Thanks for having me. Indeed, I did a calculation that indicated that in order for it to accelerate in the way that it did recently, it must have, if it's a natural comet, it must have lost a substantial fraction of its mass, of all the 20% or so. And we should see a very massive cloud of gas around it as soon as it comes out of the being hidden behind the sun. That should weigh of order 5 billion tons of gas around it. If we don't see that, there must have been some other means of propulsion that gave it that acceleration. So that's very exciting.
I guess he's saying that if it were to be the sun burning off the gas causing it to shoot in another direction, then you would see it lose more mass. I guess that's what he's saying. Let's hear him out also in this podcast here. He said that there were 9 different anomalies, but they also get into, I guess, as it relates to the government shutdown, holding back some footage.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by that because science is a privilege. We should allow ourselves to be curious about things in nature and rely on data guiding us. So it's all about collecting data and learning from it. But experts very often they base their reputation, their stature on past knowledge, and they want to pretend they know the answer in advance, and they speak as an authority telling you what the answer is. I'm trying to advocate humility. We are getting objects from outside the solar system. We shouldn't assume that they are the same as the rocks that we have in our backyard. Just like getting objects from the street.
I do agree that people can be kind of overly skeptical, but at the same time, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So it's like when you immediately jump from, I guess the presumption of rocks all the way to it could be aliens just because the propulsion was unexpected. I think that you would probably, just because aliens is such an extraordinary claim, you'd probably assume it's something other than aliens, like weaker than aliens, less exciting than aliens. But it is unexpected nevertheless, right?
One of them might be a tennis ball thrown by a neighbor. That's all I'm saying. Let's be curious, especially when the object doesn't seem to look like the typical kind of rock that we have in our backyard. So 3I-ATLAS has 9 anomalies according to my list on medium.com. I keep providing updates about it. The best image we could have had of 3I-ATLAS was obtained on October 3rd, October 2nd, October 3rd, 2025, by the high-rise camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. We know that these images were taken. They're held hostage to the government shutdown in the
Now we're getting into deep conspiracy theory territory. I'm not saying he's implying that they're keeping them a secret because they have some sort of revelatory photos of an alien engine on a comet, but it is kind of funny. That's a funny thing to chew on for conspiracy theorists. That would be a good title for the video. But as far as I understand, the government shutdown, it says here in my news source that is shut down because Democrats want Obamacare subsidies extended and Republicans refuse to attach that to a funding bill. GOP says reopen first, negotiate later. Dems say no deal without healthcare protections, and nobody's blinking. So that's kind of the status quo. That's the mainstream narrative. Obviously, the mainstream news wouldn't tell you that they're hiding some sort of alien footage underneath a shutdown, but it's probably most likely that they have a shutdown and it's just coincidentally causing a delay in results for, I guess, showing this footage that would probably show there's not an engine. I don't think if there was like an engine, it necessarily would look the way we think if it's alien. It wouldn't be like this rocket propulsion device. I wouldn't assume, right? Probably would be something more advanced than that. That's just my assumption. Let's
the US. Now I ask, how difficult is it to just share that data? It should be straightforward. A graduate student at the University of Arizona could do that. The principal investigator is a professor at the University of Arizona. Now, of course, they might be under contract and they have to wait until NASA gives them the green light. But it just doesn't make sense to hold.
Yeah, I can see where he's coming from. I'm sure there are reasons, People can look into that. I wouldn't get too conspiratorial about that, but that is definitely something that I guess you would see in conspiracy theories this week. They're holding back the alien footage with the government shutdown. It's all to distract you from the aliens. All right, let's go into his 9 reasons that he sees it as anomalous. So one is the trajectory is closely aligned with the solar system's planets. Okay. Number 2 is it visited several planets. That's interesting. It grew an anti-tail. All right. It appears to be enormous. Nice. Its nickel to iron ratios are off the charts. Sweet. Its plume is mostly carbon dioxide ice. It's extremely negatively polarized. It could be behind the famous WOW signal. It's much bluer than the sun. If it smells like a comet. That's interesting. So these are anomalies. You can look into this article. This is by Futurism, 9 Reasons the Scientist is Suspicious. The object screaming past the sun is a city-sized alien spacecraft. So these anomalies are pretty interesting to look into. You can analyze them for yourself. Here we have Elon's take on it.
Avi Loeb was on the podcast a couple days ago talking about it.
Yeah, it could be aliens. I don't know, but
apparently today they're saying that it's changed course. Did you see that, Jamie?
Jimmy,
Avi
pull
Loeb
that
said
up.
something today. I'll send it to you.
Pull up the AI slop 50 Cent.
I know it's on Reddit. Here you go, Jamie. I'll send it to you right now. It's fascinating. It's fascinating also because it's made almost entirely of nickel, whatever it is. And the only way that exists here is industrial alloys, apparently.
There are definitely comets and asteroids that are made primarily of nickel. In fact,
really?
Yeah. So the places
Elon
where you mine nickel on Earth is actually where there was an asteroid or comet that hit Earth that was a nickel-rich.
Wow! And it left a giant
meteorite.
nickel-rich deposit.
So I guess Elon is skeptical here. Prior in the interview, Elon was like, I definitely would never, I would tell you. Is that what he said? He said, I would definitely tell you. I would come on your podcast if I knew aliens existed. So he's doubtful. Let's see what Neil deGrasse has to say here.
3 objects have been found in the last decade. Okay? 3 of them.
So this is one of those 3 interstellar objects, I guess. I guess that's why it's called, 3I-ATLAS. It's like interstellar.
And they've had some anomalous features. Fun. I love it. The first of these, Oumuamua, discovered with telescopes in Hawaii. That's a Hawaiian word for first scout, basically.
It definitely sounds
so that,
Hawaiian.
As it came through the solar system, we said, all right, we know what trajectory an object with that speed and that direction coming in should take as it rounds the sun. Then there was the actual trajectory, which was different.
Yeah,
like,
you can't get it right.
Whoa. Well,
Why is that surprising?
have a way of outgassing when they get near the sun, and that puts an extra little sort of force on their arc of motion.
I think that's what the other scientist was referring to, or the Harvard professor, when he was saying that it should lose a certain amount of mass due to this outgassing, which would be a kind of its propulsion mechanism, and that because it didn't lose enough mass to propel it the way it did, that it must have had some other form of propulsion. I think that's what he was saying.
That has them move in ways that are not purely gravitational. And that's true for all comets. So we thought maybe it's outgassing. But suppose you look and there's no outgassing. So what's going on? Well, that's fun. We don't understand it. Not initially. So what's your first thought? Is it aliens? That could be. Like I said, it's not my first thought.
Right.
I promise you, it will be my last thought.
Okay, but hold on a second. My rule of thumb is that you bet against NDT. Whatever he says is usually just wrong, or his first instinct is just incorrect. That means we could have aliens, you guys. He's that bad. Like his instincts are that bad. I'm thinking it's aliens, you guys. Neil deGrasse Tyson is tipping me over the edge on aliens.
But it's not in the list. It's in the list. It's just way down based on the history of trying to understand things
at the top of the list
that we don't understand.
Now that
we
you
have
said
two more objects that have come through, and they have some weird properties. The brightness, the rotation rate, and so they don't match some of our models for what comets and asteroids should do. Whatever anomalous behavior these objects exhibit, I'm delighted that they're finally in the catalog, and we'll figure it out one day, maybe.
All right, so he doesn't have anything other than, maybe it is. It's probably at the bottom of the list. I would have to agree with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but just I'm so convinced that you just counter trade NDT and then you have the truth. So maybe I could put it a little bit higher just because NDT said it was at lower. All right, let's see what this guy has to say, Hank Green.
Isn't the 3I-ATLAS object coming from the direction of the WOW signal? This is interesting to me. So Avi Loeb has made the case that both Oumuamua and 3I-ATLAS are coming in at a very specific trajectory. But all trajectories are specific, and Oumuamua came in kind of perpendicular to the solar system and in the direction that the solar system moves through the galaxy. It's moving through the galaxy like this. The Oumuamua came in like this. That kind of makes sense to me. Just to me. Like, it's just like a vibe that, like, if we're moving this way, then we're, like, not moving in the same direction in the galaxy as us. We're kind of, like, run into it. So that was seen as, like, a weird thing. Like, isn't it weird that it's coming from this direction? But actually, it makes kind of sense to me. But also, like, it was pitched as, like, maybe they're doing that for a reason so that we don't detect them. So they're coming in from an undetectable angle from the top. But then 3I-ATLAS comes in from the side, and Avi Loeb was like, that's very suspicious. And I'm like, okay, so both of these are suspicious, but for opposite reasons. And both of them have reasons why you might think it happened. Like if the solar system is moving through the galaxy like this and it like runs into something, that's how Oumuamua would look. And like this, what we've got is a bunch of telescopes that are all pointed along.
I don't think the angle that it approaches from is the anomaly that people are saying makes it possibly alien. I think he's just talking about something entirely different, maybe irrelevant to whether or not it's aliens.
The plane of the solar system, so they're more likely to catch objects that are along the plane of the solar system. And it was actually quite lucky that we caught Oumuamua. The pan-stars, which is what caught Oumuamua, isn't usually pointed up there. It just does it a little bit. It makes sense that we would detect objects that we can detect because we're pointing telescopes around there. But both of those were said to be weird, even though they were like opposite trajectories, and also there were other explanations for them. But also, isn't 3I-ATLAS coming from the direction of the WOW signal? I just think that we do this. Like, it's just pattern matching. But if it was coming like from the direction of Alpha Centauri, then we'd be like, oh, that's another reason to think why this could be a probe, is because it's coming from our nearest neighbor. It's a little like having a weird license plate. Like if your license plate is like 343433, that would feel quite cool and random. But there's a lot of configuration that feel like something. If it was 686866, that would also feel weird. There's a lot of those. Like my first phone number when I moved to Missoula was so good. It was like a bunch of repeating patterns. And now mine isn't anymore. But sometimes there are patterns. And saying this thing is coming from the direction that we detected the WOW signal from is like, well, first of all, not exactly. Like within a pretty wide margin of error. And second, like it was going to come from somewhere. And there's probably a lot more like ways that you could say that something's weird than you'd think. Like if it was coming really close to Earth, then that would be interesting, but it's coming closer to Mars. You'd think that it would pick Earth if they were going to they'd pick us. Definitely.
So he's saying that there are a lot of coincidences that would be, I guess, cool enough as a narrative to say that this could be coming from the direction of aliens. Like it could be coming from any star, and you just kind of do a projection. You're like, it's coming from there. Maybe they are from there. You build a narrative around that, and that it wasn't even that close to the signal that they think could be like some sort of alien signal or something like that, the WOW signal. Let's hear what Dr. Stephen Greer has to say. This guy's been kind of like a conspiracy theorist.
1 light year is the distance that a light goes at 186,000 miles every second for a whole year. So every second of a year, that's the distance. That's what a light year is. It's not a measure. It's a measurement of distance, not time. You know, at that speed, it'd be ludicrous that they could ever get here.
So he's saying that it's moving too slow, right? So if the comet was an alien spaceship, he imagines it would be moving much faster if it were to come from somewhere so far away that it's, you know, even though it changes directions and seems to have to have some form of alternative form of propulsion to, you know, accommodate for what people observe, that's not sufficient for him to feel like it's anywhere close to the ballpark of alien technology. That's an interesting, like, rationalist argument. I was expecting Stephen Greer was gonna say that it was real or something like that. So I don't know. Obviously, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and, you know, lack of clarity doesn't make it necessarily easy or correct to just leap right to the most extraordinary claim that this is aliens, right? I remember this guy, so his whole take on the way that aliens or UFOs come from a man named Warner von Braun, that was kind of like a transplant from where is it, Germany, into NASA, or the space program for the United States. And basically he, on his deathbed, according to different people around him, such as assistants and then also Stephen Greer, I guess, was told that there was a conspiracy by the government that they wanted to basically increase the weaponization in space, in the commercialization in space, which has already kind of been, I guess, worked towards in terms of there being a commercialization of lower Earth orbit and the kind of legislation put, you know, together for that, and Space Force and stuff like that. And it seems kind of sci-fi, but there are just like basic things that you would commercialize lower Earth orbit for, like satellites and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure if they're used necessarily in lower Earth orbit, but like there are reasons that are grounded that aren't like Star Trek that you would need to commercialize lower Earth orbit. But what Stephen Greer would say was that, you know, to the degree that they ramp it up, that they would need some form of justification for funding or you know, sentiment around weaponizing space, and that, you know, eventually they'd bring out these false flags, which I know is like a really hot topic, that if anything were to happen, it would be a false flag. This is a false flag. Like Charlie Kirk would be like one of those situations, or this, like everybody's saying it's like everything is a conspiracy theory. So there could be some sort of like mass psychosis at this point when it comes to that stuff. And I acknowledge that. But this guy, it was before all of that, before everyone was all about it, before everyone was noticing and this kind of stuff. It was more or less something you wouldn't say. And he was saying the whole time that if they ever come out with, you know, something like a comet, it's going to hit Earth, it would be the excuse to weaponize space. But then that the final boss would be aliens, that they would say that aliens are attacking, and that would be the reason we need to weaponize space. So that's the conspiracy theory that he goes with. So maybe it does make sense that Stephen Greer would kind of be anti this whole thing and saying that it's ridiculous, and coming up with some form of reasoning why it's ridiculous, even though he himself like meditates in the desert to try and have like an encounter of the fifth kind where he has like some sort of communion with aliens because he's meditating in some sort of psychic thing, right? You know, that's funny. That kind of stuff is funny. So, you know, what if it were aliens? I don't know if the world is necessarily prepared for that. If you dive deep into the alien conspiracy theory community, there was like a narrative over the past decade that went something like the government is preparing us for this massive disclosure process where they slowly ramp up the cable television programming and get people on board with aliens in the past. And maybe they discover a pyramid in Antarctica and they slowly ramp it up. We're like, oh, maybe there were ancient aliens. It's not so immediately now. But as soon as people acclimate to the fact that they existed in the past, or maybe were previously on Mars, or have these ancient structures around, then we would be ready for the next step where it's like, okay, maybe there's an alien that passes Earth and we see that there is something out in the universe, or they finally roll out the pictures of the UFOs that they've been keeping, and it's kind of like high definition footage of actual flying saucers that are not unidentified, that are actually just like really anomalous. They aren't UFOs, they are UAPs. It's aerial. I forget what the unidentified aerial phenomenon is, the new term, right? they kind of rebranded, and it goes in line with that whole conspiracy theory where prior they had a program that would literally discredit UFO communities, and the whole idea was to not let civilization or society itself collapse under the pressure of knowing that something so shocking existed. So they would hide it from us, discredit, but then now it's flipped on its head, and it's kind of like, let's replace the word UFO with UAP to kind of re-legitimize it, because we already delegitimized UFO by saying that people who talk about UFOs are crazy. So now people with like whistleblowing credentials, and they like, shop around this guy, Luis Elizondo, who goes on these different podcasts and basically talks about how they have these different programs. And to me, it's like, yeah, it does seem a little bit kind of like disclosure, but in the same breath that the people who talked about disclosure, they would often talk about other forms of disclosure around the elites and things like that. And it was all kind of balled up together. And I think a lot of people who were kind of in that camp of trying to like participate in conspiracy theory were more or less discredited over the last 10 years, as if like their narrative is not coming true. It was kind of like a QAnon narrative or some form of like alternative conservative narrative where there was some sort of like, thing where Trump was like gonna save everything, and there's pedophiles everywhere, and draining the swamp was like draining the pedophiles, and there was like aliens involved, where you're supposed to like figure out at the end of the day that there's this spiritual battle and aliens are a part of it, and you have the good aliens and the bad aliens. And it's kind of like South Park, like Baby Sparks McGeezax trying to introduce you to the Galactic Federation. It's kind of like that. There's a bunch of stuff out there when it comes to talking about aliens, and these characters like Stephen Greer that are kind of involved in that. If you get like watch any History Channel, it gets really involved with that stuff, and you get people with their own spin-off versions of the History Channel on their own networks like Gaia, stuff like that. So I think it's a pretty interesting thing to consider, but all in all, over the past decade, a lot of that space has taken a lot of reputational damage, as it has in the past. But I feel like this is self-inflicted, even if it's organic and kind of happening. I don't know who necessarily runs Gaia or History Channel or any of these, sort of sensationalist networks that push this stuff. But this coming from a Harvard professor is different. So I figure they would look into it. But with any of these things, they usually come inconclusive. They're usually just like a nothing burger at the end, kind of like the nothing ever happens guy is always right. Chud, nothing ever happens. So if I had to bet, I would say nothing ever happens, just because that's kind of how I've been conditioned at this point.